She was worth billions, right? Owned skyscrapers, flew private jets, moved like a chess master across boardrooms full of sharks. But one quiet night, everything she thought she knew about loyalty, love, and even herself shattered into pieces. Vanessa Lair, the youngest self-made billionaire in New York, the woman people whispered about in both awe and fear, came home early from a brutal 48-hour deal in Singapore. No one knew she was back. No one was supposed to. Her limousine rolled up the long driveway past midnight, tires crunching softly over gravel. The glass mansion stood dark, silent, except for a faint glow bleeding from the west wing. Vanessa slipped off her heels, letting her toes touch the cold marble. Then she heard it. Faint music drifting down the hallway. But not the usual crisp Vivaldi she played during galas. No, this was soft, hushed, a French lullaby, slightly warped from an old record player. She frowned and followed the sound, each step heavier than the last, until she reached the living room. That's when she saw him. Elias, the janitor. The quiet man with graying temples who had cleaned her halls for 7 years without ever really existing in her world. The man she'd passed in corridors, barely exchanging 10 words. And there he was, standing barefoot on her Persian rug, cradling a little girl in a faded pink dress, no older than 4. He didn't see her at first. He was swaying, slow and deliberate, whispering along to the lullaby, one hand stroking the child's hair, the other supporting her tiny back. Her cheek rested against his chest, peaceful, trusting. Vanessa froze in the shadows. 1,000 thoughts collided in her head. What the hell is going on? Who is this child? Why is he here? But her body stayed still, like even her heartbeat didn't want to break the moment. Then Elias turned and saw her. He froze too, guilt and fear flashing across his face. He carefully laid the little girl on the sofa, tucking a pillow under her head, his hands trembling as he straightened up. "Miss Lair, I didn't know you were home," he stammered. She didn't say a word, just stared. "She's my granddaughter," he whispered finally, his voice breaking. "Her mama, my daughter, passed away last month. Cancer. We lost our home last week. I didn't have anywhere to take her. We've been sleeping in the maintenance room." Silence stretched. Vanessa looked at the child, then back at the man who'd spent nearly a decade sweeping her floors, never asking for anything, never taking up space. For the first time, she really saw him. Not a janitor. A grandfather. A man trying to keep the last piece of his world safe. Something cracked inside her chest right then. Old walls she didn't even know she'd built. That night, Vanessa didn't sleep. She sat in the hallway outside the guest suite, watching Sophie, the little girl, breathe softly, her tiny hands curled into fists. And as she sat there, another memory surfaced, one she hadn't touched in decades. She was 5 years old again, sitting in her father's beat-up car in the rain. He'd just lost his job, and they had nowhere to go. It was the janitor at his office, a man named Mr. Brossard, who offered them shelter in his attic for 3 weeks until her father got back on his feet. Back then, kindness saved her family. But somewhere between climbing the corporate ladder, firing entire departments, and buying herself a glass palace in the sky, she'd buried that part of her story. Until tonight. The next morning, Elias packed a small bag and took Sophie's hand. He assumed he'd be fired, maybe even sued for trespassing. He was halfway down the driveway when a voice stopped him. "Where do you think you're going?" Vanessa stood on the patio in a gray robe, her hair tied up in a messy bun, coffee in hand. Her tone was sharp, but her eyes softer somehow. "I thought." Elias hesitated, confused. "I thought you'd want us gone." She walked toward him, each step deliberate. "What's her name?" "Sophie," he said quietly. "She just turned 4. Vanessa nodded, then took a long breath. "The guest suite downstairs," she said, gesturing toward the mansion. "Fresh linens. Private bathroom. I want you both moved in there by noon." Elias blinked, stunned. "Miss Lair, I can't." "You can," she cut in firmly. "And you will. From now on, you're not just a janitor here. You're Sophie's grandfather. You'll stay? You'll help me take care of this place and her." His throat tightened. He tried to speak, but couldn't. Sophie peeked out from behind his leg, clutching his trousers, her wide eyes uncertain. Vanessa crouched down, met Sophie's gaze, and smiled gently. What do you say, kiddo? Think you can handle living in a house with 12 bedrooms? That was the moment everything changed. The mansion stopped feeling like a showroom and started breathing like a home. Sophie's giggles filled the echoing halls. Vanessa found herself coming home earlier, canceling unnecessary trips, spending nights on the living room floor building Lego castles with Sophie while Elias pretended to accidentally knock them over. The empire she had built, the glass walls, the private jets, the endless meetings, stopped feeling like chains. For the first time in years, it all had meaning. And Elias? He never let a single floor collect dust again. But more than that, he reminded Vanessa what truly mattered. Not balance sheets, not stock prices, but connection, compassion, family, the kind you choose. Months later, during a high-stakes board meeting, Vanessa stood before her executives, sleeves rolled up, hair loose, her entire presence different. At the back of the room, Elias sat quietly, Sophie perched on his lap, swinging her legs. You want to know why our company is growing faster than ever? She said, scanning the room. It's because I finally remembered what built this place from the beginning. She pointed to Elias and Sophie. Kindness. That's it. That's the foundation. And if any of you forget that, you're in the wrong room. Silence filled the air for a moment. Then one executive started clapping. Another joined. And then the entire room rose to their feet. Not for Vanessa, not for profit margins, but for a janitor who became family and a CEO who finally opened her heart. Now, here's the part where you come Oh, you think Vanessa did the right thing? Should a CEO cross that invisible line between business and personal, or did she risk too much by letting her guard down? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment, share your opinion, and tell me where you're watching from. And hey, if this story touched you, even just a little, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. We've got more real, raw, human stories coming your way, because sometimes the richest people aren't the ones with the biggest bank accounts. They're the ones who remember where they came from. You know how people say happily ever after, like it's the end of the story? Yeah, that's not real life. Real life waits until you're comfortable, until you've finally exhaled, and then it throws you a curveball you never see coming. For months, things in Vanessa's mansion were different, lighter. Sophie's laughter bounced off the marble walls. Elias whistled while he polished the railings, and Vanessa, for the first time in her adult life, stopped checking her emails past midnight. She traded 70-hour workweeks for pancakes on Sundays, traded boardroom wars for bedtime stories. But peace never lasts forever. Not when you're sitting on billions. It started with a letter. One gray morning, Sophie was coloring at the kitchen island when the housekeeper brought in a thick cream envelope, no return address. Vanessa tore it open casually, sipping her coffee, and froze. Her entire estate, the glass mansion, the land it stood on, was under legal dispute. Some private investment group claimed her property rights were invalid, that the title had been misfiled years ago. The letter wasn't a warning. It was a 48-hour eviction notice. Vanessa blinked hard, like maybe if she read it again, it would make sense. But no, black and white ink doesn't lie. She set the letter down slowly, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. Elias noticed her face pale. Miss Lair, you okay? He asked carefully. She hesitated, then handed him the paper. They're trying to take the house, she whispered. Elias scanned the letter, frowning. Can they even do that? Vanessa leaned back, arms crossed, trying to hide the tremor in her hands. Not legally, but if this is who I think it is, they'll bend every rule until they get what they want. Who? Sterling Row Capital, she said, the name bitter on her tongue. Private equity. Bottom feeders in suits. They've been circling me for years, waiting for any crack in my armor. Elias glanced at Sophie, who was humming softly, oblivious. So what now? Vanessa exhaled, long and sharp. Now, we fight. The next 24 hours turned into a battlefield. Vanessa had her attorneys on one line, her CFO on another, and the county recorder's office on hold in the background. Every document, every filing, every deed. She combed through it all like her entire soul was stapled to the paperwork. But then Elias knocked on her office door, holding something she didn't expect out of a box. Found this in the attic, he said, setting it gently on her desk. Figured it might be important. Inside were old leather-bound files her father had left behind. Receipts, personal letters, hand-drawn sketches of the land before the mansion was built. But buried at the bottom was something else. A map. Not just any map. An original GIS survey from 1974, signed and sealed by the county clerk. It showed boundary lines no one had seen in decades, and according to it, Vanessa's property extended 2 acres further west than the modern filings showed. Elias leaned over her shoulder, pointing. See that ridge? If this holds up in court, they've got nothing. She stared at him. Where the hell did you learn to read land surveys? He smiled faintly. Wasn't always a janitor, Miss Lair. I used to be a landscape engineer before. Well, life happened. For the first time, she realized Elias wasn't just a quiet man who mopped floors. He was someone with a skill set she desperately needed. Why the next morning, they were in court. Sterling Rowe's lawyers showed up in polished Armani suits, smirking like they'd already won. Vanessa walked in flanked by her legal team, but Elias sat right behind her, clutching that old map like a secret weapon. The judge glanced over the documents, frowning. Sterling Rowe's attorneys argued technicalities, claiming improper registration and invalid conveyance. But when Vanessa's lawyer presented the 1974 survey, the entire room shifted. This, the judge said, tapping the seal, trumps every modern filing you've brought me. Case dismissed. Sterling Rowe's lead attorney slammed his pen down, red-faced. This isn't over, he muttered as they stormed out. Elias leaned in close and whispered, that felt good. Vanessa smirked. Damn right it did. For a few days, life went back to normal, or at least their new version of normal. But Vanessa couldn't shake the feeling that Sterling Rowe wasn't done. People like that didn't lose gracefully. She was right. 2 weeks later, her CFO called with news that made her blood run cold. Sterling Rowe had launched a hostile takeover bid for her company. If they succeeded, not only would she lose control of her empire, but Sophie and Elias would lose the safety she'd promised them. This wasn't just business anymore. It was personal. That night, sitting on the back patio with a glass of wine, Vanessa stared at the city skyline, her mind spinning. Sophie padded out in her pajamas, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Why are you sad? Sophie asked softly. Vanessa pulled her onto her lap, brushing her curls back. Because some people want to take away the things we care about, she admitted. Sophie frowned thoughtfully. Then we hold on tighter. Out of the mouths of 4-year-olds, right? Vanessa kissed her forehead and made a promise to herself. No one was tearing this family apart. The war got uglier. Sterling Rowe started leaking false stories to the press, accusing Vanessa of embezzlement and fraud. Investors panicked, stock prices dropped, and the media vultures circled like sharks smelling blood. Through it all, Elias became her anchor. Late nights in the study, strategizing over spreadsheets and land filings. Early mornings walking Sophie to preschool before conference calls. Somehow, somewhere in the chaos, the three of them became inseparable, a strange, patched-together little family. And then came the twist point one night. As Vanessa was reviewing old board documents, she found something she couldn't explain. A signature on a deed transfer from 20 years ago, her father's name. But the problem was, her father never signed it. Her chest tightened. Elias, she whispered, calling him into the study. I think Sterling Rowe forged this decades ago. This isn't a takeover. It's been a setup from the start. He frowned, scanning the papers. If you can prove that, they won't just lose, Vanessa said, her voice hardening. They'll burn. Elias looked at her, pride in his eyes. Then let's make sure they do. The next chapter of Vanessa's life wasn't about boardrooms or billion-dollar deals. It was about survival, justice, and something she hadn't had in years, people worth fighting for. But Sterling Rowe wasn't backing down. And as much as Vanessa wanted to believe she was untouchable, deep down she knew this was just the beginning.